What would you do if the most powerful being in the galaxy, a creature who has ruled over countless civilizations for 1,000 years, suddenly declared that you, an ordinary human, were worthy of something no other species had ever received? What if this ancient vampire queen, who had watched empires rise and fall like seasons, who had fed on the life force of entire worlds, looked at humanity and saw something that made her question everything she thought she knew about power, survival, and what it truly means to be alive? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a maintenance engineer aboard a deep space mining vessel, who becomes the focal point of a cosmic shift that will either elevate humanity to unimaginable heights or doom them to become the next meal for a predator older than most stars. When the Crimson Dominion's ancient ruler chooses a human as her successor, the galaxy trembles, not because of what she has done, but because of what humanity might become. Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished replacing the plasma conduit in Sector 7 of the mining vessel Prosperity. The work was routine, mechanical, the kind that let his mind wander to anywhere but the cramped maintenance tunnels of humanity's farthest outpost. 3 years in his 5-year contract, Marcus had grown accustomed to the isolation of deep space mining operations. The crew of 47 souls was the only human contact for light years in any direction. He had no idea that today would be the day everything changed. The first sign of trouble came through the ship's communication array. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident despite the static. All hands to stations. We have an unidentified vessel approaching. Size. Christ, the sensors must be malfunctioning. This thing is showing up as larger than a moon. Marcus secured his tools and made his way to the nearest observation deck. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see nothing but the familiar star field and the asteroid they'd been mining for the past 6 months. Then, as if reality itself was folding, space began to shimmer. What emerged from the distortion defied every law of physics Marcus understood. The vessel was indeed moon-sized, but it wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It appeared to be grown rather than built, its surface a living amalgamation of bone-white structures and pulsing crimson veins that carried light instead of blood. Massive spires twisted skyward from its surface, and as Marcus watched in fascination and horror, he realized they weren't architectural features. They were ribs, the skeletal remains of creatures so large their bones had been repurposed into a city. The communication system erupted with static, then cleared to reveal a voice that seemed to bypass the speakers entirely and resonate directly in every crew member's mind. The voice was feminine, ancient beyond measure, and carried the weight of millennia. Inhabitants of the small vessel, you will prepare for boarding. Resistance is futile, but more importantly, it is unnecessary. I seek discourse, not destruction. Captain Rodriguez tried to respond, but the communication array had gone dead. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing blast doors and powering up what few defensive systems the mining ship possessed. Marcus found himself pressed against the viewport, unable to look away from the impossible sight before him. Smaller craft began to detach from the bone ship, moving with purpose toward the Prosperity. These vessels were equally organic, resembling massive bats with translucent wings that somehow propelled them through the vacuum of space. As they approached, Marcus could see figures standing on their backs, tall, elegant beings with pale skin that seemed to absorb starlight rather than reflect it. The boarding was swift and bloodless. The alien beings moved through the ship's hull as if it were water, their forms becoming ethereal when solid matter stood in their way. The crew's weapons passed harmlessly through them, yet their touch was solid enough to render humans unconscious with a mere caress. Marcus found himself paralyzed not by their supernatural abilities, but by the sheer alien beauty of their movements. They glided rather than walked, their elongated limbs moving with predatory grace. Their faces were angular, almost elfin, but their eyes held depths that spoke of vast intelligence and terrifying experience. Within minutes, the entire crew was gathered in the cargo bay. The beings had arranged them in a perfect circle, each human standing exactly arm's length from the next. Marcus noticed they hadn't been harmed, merely positioned with the methodical precision of a species accustomed to organizing lesser beings. That's when she appeared. The air in the cargo bay simply folded in on itself, and suddenly she was there, standing in the center of their circle. If the other beings were beautiful in an alien way, she was magnificent in a way that transcended species. Taller than her companions by a head, her skin was the color of fresh snow with an inner luminescence that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Her hair fell past her shoulders in waves of deepest black that seemed to absorb light, and her eyes were the color of fresh blood, not the dark red of dried wounds, but the bright crimson of life itself. She wore robes that shifted between states of matter, sometimes appearing as rich fabric, other times as flowing liquid, and occasionally as dancing flame. Around her neck hung a collar of what appeared to be compressed stars, each one pulsing with the light of a captured sun. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human ears weren't designed to hear, creating an almost musical quality that made Marcus feel as though he was listening to the voice of creation itself. "I am Seraphina Nixthra, Crimson Queen of the Dominion, Keeper of the Blood Eternal, she who has walked between stars for 1,000 years." Her gaze swept across the assembled humans, and Marcus felt a chill when those impossible eyes met his. "Your species has finally ventured far enough from your birth world to enter my domain." Captain Rodriguez, to his credit, found his voice despite the circumstances. "What do you want from us? We're just miners. We pose no threat to anyone." Seraphina's laugh was like silver bells mixed with a whisper of solar wind. "Threat? Oh, little captain, you misunderstand the nature of our encounter. I have not come because you threaten me. I have come because you intrigue me." She began to move around the circle, examining each crew member with the intensity of a scientist studying specimens. Her bare feet made no sound on the metal deck plating, and Marcus noticed that wherever she stepped, the metal seemed to warm, taking on a faint reddish glow that lingered after she passed. "For Millennium, I have ruled over 17 different species. The Velcari with their crystalline wisdom, the Threnodidae who sing their thoughts, the mighty Colossus whose strength could shatter worlds. Each species had something unique, some quality that made them useful or interesting or both." She paused in front of Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's xenobiologist. Yet in all that time, not one of them has surprised me. Dr. Kim found her voice with scientific curiosity overcoming fear. "What makes humans different?" Seraphina smiled, revealing teeth that were perfectly white and just slightly too sharp. "Your species does something remarkable, Dr. Kim. You hope." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt compelled to understand, though he couldn't explain why her words seemed so significant. "Hope?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Every species hopes for something." "No," Seraphina said, continuing her circuit around them. "Every species desires. They desire food, shelter, reproduction, territory, power. These are predictable wants based on biological imperatives." She stopped directly in front of Marcus, and he felt as though those crimson eyes were seeing through him to something he didn't know existed. "But humans hope. You hope for things that may never exist, for outcomes that have no basis in reality, for futures that defy probability. You hope even when logic demands despair." Marcus felt heat rush to his face as her attention focused on him. There was something in her gaze that made him feel simultaneously like the most important person in the universe and like an insect under a magnifying glass. "You," she said, and her voice took on a quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. "You hope to find something meaningful in the vastness of space, even though you spend your days maintaining equipment in a tin, millions of miles from anything that matters to your species." The words should have stung, but instead they felt like a revelation. Marcus realized she was right. He did hope for something more, something he couldn't even name. Serafina turned to address the group again. Your species has qualities that have been extinct in the galaxy for eons. You create art with no practical purpose. You sacrifice for others with no genetic relation to yourselves. You explore simply to know what lies beyond the next horizon. Her expression became almost wistful. These are traits I have not seen since the early days of my reign, when the galaxy was young and full of possibilities. Dr. Kim stepped forward slightly. Are you saying you're going to study us? Study? Serafina laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. My dear doctor, I'm going to do something far more significant. I'm going to offer one of you the chance to become my heir. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ship's environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as the implications of her words sank in. Captain Rodriguez was the first to find his voice. Heir to what? To everything, Serafina replied simply. To the Crimson Dominion that spans half the galaxy. To knowledge that predates your species by millions of years. To power that can reshape reality itself. She paused, her gaze once again finding Marcus in the group. And to immortality. The word hung in the air like a promise, and a threat simultaneously. Marcus felt something stirring in his chest, a hunger he hadn't known existed. Around him, he could see his crewmates struggling with the same mix of desire and terror. But why? Dr. Kim asked, why would you choose a human? Why would you give up power you've held for a millennium? Serafina's expression became distant, as if she was looking through time itself. Because power without purpose is merely existence, and I have existed long enough to understand the difference. I have ruled through fear, through strength, through the simple reality that I was more ancient and terrible than anything else in the galaxy. She turned back to face them directly. But I have never ruled through inspiration. I have never led beings who followed because they chose to, rather than because they had no choice. She began walking around the circle again, but this time her attention was focused solely on Marcus. He felt as though invisible threads were drawing her toward him, and he found himself unable to look away from her approach. You humans have something that I lost long ago, the ability to inspire others to be more than they are. Your species takes broken, hopeless situations and somehow finds ways to turn them into triumphs. You face impossible odds and convince yourself that impossible simply means difficult. She stopped directly in front of Marcus again. This is why I believe one of you could succeed where I have merely endured. Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What would we become? Serafina's smile was radiant and terrifying. Something new, something that has never existed in the galaxy before. A being with the power of the ancients, but the heart of humanity. She reached out and gently touched his face, her fingers cold as starlight. You would become the bridge between what this galaxy is and what it could be. The touch sent electricity through Marcus's entire nervous system. For just a moment, he saw flashes of impossible visions, vast fleets moving between stars, beings of pure energy dancing in the hearts of suns, civilizations rising from nothing to span entire systems. And through it all, a figure that might have been himself, but changed, elevated, leading rather than following. The choice is yours, Serafina said, stepping back. But know that once made, it cannot be undone. The transformation I offer will change you in ways that cannot be reversed. You'll gain much, but you'll also lose much. The person you are now will become the foundation for something greater, but that person will cease to exist in any recognizable form. Marcus looked around at his crewmates. Captain Rodriguez's face was a mask of concern and confusion. Dr. Kim was practically vibrating with scientific curiosity. The others showed various degrees of fear, wonder, and incomprehension. But as he looked at each of them, Marcus realized something that surprised him. He wasn't afraid. Nervous, yes, Overwhelmed, certainly, but not afraid. For the first time in his life, he was being offered the chance to be part of something truly significant, something that could change the fundamental nature of existence itself. "How would you choose?" he asked. "Among all of us, how would you decide?" Seraphina's expression became almost predatory with satisfaction. "I won't choose. You will." She gestured, and the circle of humans suddenly found themselves standing on what appeared to be solid crystal instead of metal deck plating. The cargo bay around them had transformed into something resembling a vast amphitheater, with walls that seemed to stretch up into infinity. "I have prepared a series of trials, not tests of strength or intelligence, but tests of the essential nature of your humanity." Above them, the ceiling became transparent, revealing the bone ship's interior in all its alien majesty. Vast chambers filled with beings Marcus couldn't identify stretched out in all directions. Some areas pulsed with energy that hurt to look at directly. Others seemed to contain entire ecosystems, complete with weather patterns and what might have been cities. "Each trial will reveal something about who you truly are," Seraphina continued. "Not what you think you are, not what you aspire to be, but the essential core of your being when all pretense is stripped away." Her eyes found Marcus again. "The one who proves most worthy of the transformation will be given the choice to accept or decline my offer." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "And if we all refuse, then you will be returned to your ship unharmed, and the galaxy will continue as it has for the past millennium, under the rule of a being who has grown weary of existence." Seraphina's voice took on a note of sadness that seemed to echo from somewhere infinitely deep. "And eventually, when even immortality becomes unbearable, the Crimson Dominion will simply end." The weight of that statement settled over the group like a blanket. Marcus realized they weren't just being offered personal transformation, they were potentially being given the responsibility for the future of half the galaxy. "When do we begin?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Seraphina smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Now!" The crystal floor beneath their feet began to glow, and Marcus felt a sensation like being lifted by invisible hands. Around him, his crewmates were experiencing the same thing, all of them rising into the air as the amphitheater transformed yet again. As they ascended, Marcus caught a glimpse of Seraphina below them, her face turned upward and her expression unreadable. In that moment, he wondered if she truly believed one of them could succeed her, or if this was simply the elaborate game of a being too ancient and powerful to find entertainment any other way. Either way, he realized there was no turning back now. Whatever happened next would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the destiny of every living being in the galaxy. The last thing he saw before the light overwhelmed his vision was Seraphina raising one pale hand in what might have been a blessing or a farewell. Then, everything dissolved into brilliance and the trials began. When Marcus's vision cleared, he found himself standing alone in what appeared to be a recreation of Earth's surface from before humanity had ever existed. Vast forests of trees he didn't recognize stretched to the horizon, and the air carried scents of flowers and growing things that made something deep in his genetic memory stir with recognition. The sky above was the perfect blue of home, but wrong somehow, too pure, too perfect, as if seen through the eyes of someone who had only heard descriptions of an Earth sky, but never seen one. A path wound through the forest ahead of him, marked by stones that pulsed with soft light. Marcus understood without being told that this was his trial, uniquely crafted for him. Somewhere in this alien recreation of paradise, he would face whatever test Seraphina had prepared. He began walking, his feet making soft sounds on the moss-covered earth. The silence was profound but not empty. He could hear the distant call of birds that might have been Earth species or might have been something else entirely. As he walked deeper into the forest, Marcus found himself thinking about the path that had brought him here. He had never intended to be extraordinary. Growing up in New Shanghai, he had been remarkably average, decent grades, acceptable social skills, no particular talents that set him apart from millions of other young people. Even his decision to join the deep space mining program had been more about economic necessity than adventure. The pay was excellent, the benefits included educational opportunities, and 5 years away from Earth would give him enough money to start whatever life he chose when he returned. But now, walking through an impossible forest on an alien vessel, Marcus realized he had been lying to himself about his motivations. He hadn't signed up for the mining program just for money. He had signed up because some part of him had always hoped that somewhere out there, among the stars, he would find something that would make his life matter. The path led him to a clearing where a simple wooden structure waited. Not quite a house, not quite a temple. It seemed to be built from living wood, branches that had grown together in precise patterns without losing their connection to roots that disappeared into the earth below. Warm light spilled from its windows, and smoke rose from a chimney that seemed to be carved from a single massive tree trunk. As Marcus approached, the door opened without anyone visible touching it. Inside, he found a scene that stopped him cold. The interior was a perfect recreation of his childhood home. Every detail was exact, from his slightly crooked picture frames his mother had never bothered to straighten to the worn spot on the couch where his father had fallen asleep watching the news countless times. But it wasn't empty. His parents were there exactly as he remembered them from his last visit home before leaving for the mining program. His mother, Elena Chun, looked up from a book she was reading and smiled at him with a warmth he had missed every day for the past 3 years. His father, David, waved from his favorite chair, where he was working on one of the mechanical puzzles he had always loved. "Marcus," his mother said, rising to embrace him. "We've been waiting for you." The embrace felt completely real. Her familiar perfume, the texture of her sweater, the way she always had to reach up slightly to hug him properly since he had passed her in height during high school. For a moment, Marcus simply held her, feeling a homesickness he had been suppressing for years wash over him in waves. "How are you here?" he asked when they finally separated. "Does it matter?" his father replied, looking up from his puzzle with the slight smile that had always meant he was about to say something he considered profound. "The important question is why you're here." Marcus looked around the familiar room, noting details he had forgotten. The way afternoon light fell through the kitchen window, the sound the old floorboards made when someone walked across them, the particular blue of the walls his mother had spent weeks deciding on when he was 12. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "This is supposed to be a trial." "It is," Elena said gently, "but not the kind you're expecting." She gestured toward the couch where they used to sit together and watch movies when he was young. "Sit with us, Marcus. We need to talk." As he settled between them, Marcus felt surrounded by everything he had given up when he chose to leave Earth. The comfort of familiarity, the security of being loved unconditionally, the simple pleasure of being in a place where he belonged without question. "Tell us about your choice," David said, his hands still working the puzzle, but his attention fully on his son. "What choice?" Marcus asked, though he already knew. "The choice to become something other than human," Elena said. Her voice was gentle, but serious. "The choice to leave behind everything you are for the possibility of becoming something you might be." Marcus felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "What do you know about that?" "We know because this is your trial," David explained. "This is the test of your humanity, not whether you possess it, but what you're willing to sacrifice to keep it." Elena took his hand, her fingers tracing the calluses he had developed from 3 years of manual labor in space. "We raise you to be a good man, Marcus. Kind, honest, willing to help others. We taught you to value family, to appreciate the simple things in life, to find joy in ordinary moments." She squeezed his hand gently. "But we never taught you to want to save the galaxy." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Marcus realized that his parents, or whatever these perfect recreations represented, were speaking to the heart of his dilemma. Everything that made him human, everything that gave his life meaning and context, was tied to his connections with other people, his understanding of himself as part of a larger human community. "If I accept Seraphina's offer," he said slowly, "I'll become something that can't come home anymore." More than that, David said, setting down his puzzle to look directly at his son. You'll become something that might not want to come home anymore. Power changes people, son. Not always in ways they expect or intend. The room around them began to shift subtly. The walls remained the same, but through the windows, Marcus could see scenes from his life playing out like movies. His first day of school, family vacations, birthdays, the day he graduated from technical college, the day he told his parents he was leaving for the mining program. Look at those memories, Elena said. Look at who you were in each of them. A child learning to ride a bicycle, a teenager awkward at his first dance, a young man making his way in the world. In every single one, you were completely, perfectly human. Marcus watched himself grow up through the windows, seeing his life from an outside perspective for the first time. He saw moments of triumph and failure, joy and sorrow, all the ordinary experiences that had shaped him into who he was. But I was never satisfied with ordinary, he said. Even as a kid, I wanted something more. Wanting more isn't wrong, David replied. It's part of what makes humans remarkable. But there's a difference between wanting to grow and wanting to become something entirely different. A new scene appeared in the windows. Marcus as a young boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting in the backyard and staring up at the stars. Even then, he had felt pulled towards something he couldn't name, some possibility that existed beyond the boundaries of his small world. You've always been a dreamer, Elena said, following his gaze to the window. We knew that about you from the beginning. It's one of the things we love most about you. But dreams and reality are different things, David added. The question isn't whether you can become what Serafina offers. The question is whether you should. Marcus stood and walked to one of the windows, pressing his hand against the glass as he watched his 8-year-old self point out constellations to a neighbor's cat who had wandered into the yard. The memory was so vivid he could almost hear his younger voice explaining the stories behind the star patterns. What if I can help people, he asked. What if the power she's offering could be used to make things better for everyone? What if it can't? Elena countered gently. What if the price of that power is everything that makes you capable of caring about other people in the first place? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus realized that his parents, or this trial, were forcing him to confront the possibility that his desire to help might be compromised by the very transformation that would give him the power to help. Serafina has ruled for 1,000 years, David said. In all that time, has she made things better for the galaxy? Or has she simply maintained control? Marcus thought about what little he had seen of the Crimson Dominion. The bone ship with its massive scale and organic architecture. The beings who served Serafina, beautiful, but somehow empty, as if they had traded away essential parts of themselves. The casual way she had described ruling over entire species. She said she was tired, Marcus said, that she wanted to give up power because existence without purpose was just enduring. And what makes you think your purpose would remain intact after transformation? Elena asked. What makes you think the Marcus who accepts her offer would still care about the same things the Marcus we raise cares about? The room began to change again, this time showing scenes Marcus didn't recognize. Through one window, he saw himself changed, still recognizably him, but different in fundamental ways. This other Marcus moved with predatory grace, his eyes holding depths of knowledge and power that seemed alien. He was beautiful in the same terrible way Serafina was beautiful, but there was something missing from his expression, some essential warmth that had been consumed by transformation. In the scene, the transformed Marcus was making decisions about entire civilizations with the casual indifference of a gardener pruning plants. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't compassionate either. He was simply beyond such concerns, operating on a level where individual lives and even entire species became abstract considerations rather than real beings with hopes and fears. Is that what I would become? Marcus asked, staring at the window. We don't know, David said honestly, but it's a possibility you need to consider. Elena joined him at the window, putting her arm around his shoulders the way she had when he was young and troubled by nightmares. Power protects itself, Marcus. Once you have enough of it, maintaining that power becomes more important than the reasons you wanted it in the first place. Marcus watched the transformed version of himself for several more moments, trying to see any trace of the person he recognized as himself. The being in the window was magnificent, commanding fleets of vessels that dwarfed Seraphina's bone ship, reshaping the fundamental structure of reality with casual gestures. But it was also alone in a way that seemed absolute. "He has everything," Marcus said quietly. "Does he?" Elena asked. "Look closer." Marcus focused on the transformed figure's face, searching for something familiar. What he found was emptiness masquerading as wisdom, isolation disguised as transcendence. The being in the window had power beyond imagination, but it no longer had any real connection to anything or anyone. It existed in a state of eternal solitude, surrounded by subordinates, but never by equals, never by friends, never by family. "The price of that transformation," David said softly, "isn't just your humanity. It's your ability to connect with anyone who hasn't paid the same price." The window showing the transformed Marcus flickered and changed, now displaying Seraphina herself in what might have been an earlier time. She was younger looking, though still ancient by human standards, and she was surrounded by beings who seemed genuinely devoted to her rather than merely obedient. But as the scene progressed through time, Marcus watched that devotion gradually transform into fear, then into simple acceptance, and, finally, into the empty compliance he had seen from her current servants. "She's offering you what she thinks is a gift," Elena said. "But she's been alone for so long that she's forgotten what she's really offering." Marcus turned away from the windows, unable to watch anymore. The room around him had returned to its perfect recreation of his childhood home, but now it felt less like comfort and more like a museum exhibit, a display of everything he would lose. "But what if I'm the only one who can make the choice?" he asked. "What if the galaxy really does need someone to rule it, and I'm the only human who has the chance to ensure that ruler cares about doing right?" "Then the galaxy has a bigger problem than you can solve," David said, "because no one person should have that kind of power, no matter how good their intentions." The words resonated with something deep in Marcus's understanding of himself and his values. He had been raised to believe in democracy, in shared responsibility, in the idea that important decisions should be made by communities rather than individuals. Everything about Seraphina's offer violated those principles. "Besides," Elena added with a smile, "who says you're the only one who can make a difference? You're part of a crew, part of a species, part of a community that extends far beyond this ship. Maybe the answer isn't becoming something more than human. Maybe it's helping humanity become more than it is." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a realization that had been building throughout the trial. His desire to accept Seraphina's offer wasn't really about saving the galaxy. It was about proving that he mattered, that his life had significance beyond the ordinary routine of existence. But that desire was based on the false premise that significance could only come from power. "There are other ways to matter," he said, understanding finally, beginning to dawn. "Infinite ways," David agreed. "Ways that don't require you to stop being yourself." The room began to brighten, light streaming through the windows with increasing intensity. Marcus felt the trial reaching its conclusion, but instead of anxiety, he felt a growing sense of clarity. "I know what I have to do," he said. Elena and David smiled at him, their expressions filled with the same love and pride he had seen countless times throughout his childhood. "We know you do," Elena said. "We always knew you would make the right choice." The light became overwhelming, and Marcus felt himself being lifted again, carried away from the perfect recreation of home toward whatever waited beyond the trial. But this time, instead of uncertainty, he felt grounded in who he was and what he valued. As the light consumed everything around him, Marcus heard his father's voice one last time. "Remember, son, the most extraordinary thing about humans is that we're extraordinary together, not alone." The words followed him into the brightness, and Marcus carried them with him as he returned to whatever reality awaited outside the trial. He had made his choice, and for the first time since boarding Seraphina's ship, he was completely certain it was the right one. Marcus materialized back in the crystal amphitheater, his consciousness snapping into focus like a rubber band that had been stretched and suddenly released. Around him, his crewmates were also returning from their individual trials, each wearing expressions that suggested they had experienced something equally profound and challenging. Dr. Sarah Kim appeared first, her face pale but resolute. Captain Rodriguez followed, his usual command presence somehow diminished, as if he had seen something that challenged his fundamental understanding of leadership. One by one, the others returned. Engineer Tom Walsh, Communications Officer Lisa Park, Medical Officer Dr. James Harrison, and the rest of the crew, each bearing the marks of their own unique trial. Seraphina stood in the center of the circle, unchanged and eternal, her crimson eyes studying each of them with the intensity of a scientist observing the results of a crucial experiment. The bone ship around them pulsed with organic light, and Marcus could sense vast alien minds focused on this moment, beings from across the Crimson Dominion watching to see what humanity would choose. "You have each faced the test of your essential nature," Seraphina announced, her voice carrying that same otherworldly harmony that seemed to resonate in dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. "You have seen who you are when all pretense is stripped away, and you have each made a choice about what you value most." She began to move around the circle again, but this time her examination was different. Instead of studying them as potential candidates, she seemed to be reading something from each person that only she could see. When her gaze fell on Marcus, he felt exposed, as if she were seeing through the trial directly into his decision. "Interesting," she murmured, pausing before him. "Very interesting indeed." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming whatever she had experienced in her trial. "What did you learn from our tests?" Seraphina smiled, an expression that seemed both satisfied and surprised. "I learned that your species is even more remarkable than I anticipated. And I learned that my offer was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes humanity valuable." She gestured, and the crystal floor beneath them began to display images, scenes from each crew member's trial. Marcus saw flashes of Dr. Kim choosing to save a dying alien child over advancing her research, Captain Rodriguez refusing to sacrifice crew members even when it would save thousands of lives, Dr. Harrison turning down the chance to cure death itself because it would violate his oath to do no harm. Each trial had presented the crew members with opportunities to gain power, knowledge, or capability at the cost of their fundamental humanity. And each of them had chosen to remain human. "You see," Seraphina continued, "I expected at least one of you to accept the transformation. I crafted trials designed to reveal which among you possessed the strength to bear the burden of cosmic power." Her expression grew thoughtful. "What I discovered instead was that your strength lies precisely in your refusal to bear that burden." Marcus found his voice. "You're disappointed that none of us wanted to become like you?" Seraphina laughed, a sound like starlight made audible. "Disappointed? My dear Marcus, I am delighted. For the first time in centuries, I have encountered beings who possess wisdom I had forgotten existed." She moved to the center of the circle, and the amphitheater around them began to change. The walls became transparent, revealing the true scope of the bone ship's interior. Vast cities carved from the remains of ancient creatures stretched in all directions, populated by thousands of the pale, elegant beings Marcus had seen earlier. But now he could see what he had missed before: the emptiness in their movements, the mechanical precision of their actions, the absence of anything that could be called joy or spontaneity. "Look upon my empire," Seraphina said, her voice taking on a note of profound sadness. "Observe the price of the power I have wielded for a millennium." As Marcus watched, he began to understand what he was seeing. The beings moving through the bone cities weren't servants or subjects. They were echoes of what they had once been. Each had once been offered the same choice Serafina had presented to the humans, and each had chosen transformation. But in gaining cosmic power, they had lost something essential that couldn't be quantified or replaced. They were once like you, Serafina explained, representatives of dozens of species, each with their own hopes, dreams, cultures, and connections. Each believed that by accepting my gift, they could use the power to benefit their people, their worlds, their civilizations. What happened to them? Dr. Kim asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They became perfect, Serafina replied. Powerful beyond measure, wise beyond mortal comprehension, capable of reshaping reality itself. And in becoming perfect, they lost the imperfections that made them capable of growth, change, surprise, and genuine connection. Marcus watched one of the transformed beings pause in its movement, turning to look directly at the amphitheater where the humans stood. Its face was beautiful, but empty, like a mask that had never been worn by a living person. For just a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of something that might have been recognition or longing, but it passed so quickly he couldn't be sure it had been real. The power corrupted them? Captain Rodriguez asked. No, Serafina said. The power perfected them. Corruption would have been preferable. At least corruption leaves room for redemption. Perfection leaves room for nothing. The implications of her words settled over the group like a weight. Marcus realized they weren't just seeing the fate of individuals who had chosen transformation. They were seeing the ultimate destiny of any being that accepted cosmic power as a solution to mortal problems. But why offer the choice at all? Lisa Park asked. If you knew what would happen to us, why make the offer? Serafina's expression became vulnerable for the first time since they had encountered her. Because I hoped you might prove strong enough to resist it. Because I hoped to find beings who could show me what I had forgotten. That there are things more valuable than power, more important than perfection, more worthwhile than eternal existence. She raised her hand, and the amphitheater filled with new images, not scenes from the trials, but visions of what could be. Marcus saw human ships moving through space, but not as conquerors or rulers. Instead, they served as bridges between different species, helping to establish communication, trade, and mutual understanding. He saw humans working alongside aliens to solve problems that neither could handle alone, combining their unique perspective with alien capabilities to create solutions that transcended what either could achieve separately. Your species possesses something that has been extinct in this galaxy for eons, Serafina said. The ability to remain yourselves while adapting to others, to grow without losing your essential nature, to help without dominating. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. Are you saying you want us to refuse your offer? I am saying that your refusal is the greatest gift you could give me, Serafina replied. For 1,000 years, I have ruled through power and fear, maintaining order through the simple reality that I was more ancient and terrible than any threat to that order. But I have never inspired anyone to be more than they were. I have never led anyone to choose cooperation over competition, growth over dominance, community over isolation. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You don't want a successor. You want to learn from us. Serafina's smile was radiant. Now you begin to understand. I offer you a different choice entirely. Not the choice to become like me, but the choice to teach me to become like you. The bone ship around them began to pulse with a different kind of energy, and Marcus could sense something fundamental shifting in its alien structure. Where before it had felt like a monument to conquest and dominance, it now felt like a vessel ready for transformation. What are you proposing? Captain Rodriguez asked. An alliance, Serafina said. Your species brings something to this galaxy that has been missing for too long. The ability to hope for better outcomes rather than simply maintaining existing ones. The wisdom to value growth over stability. The courage to remain vulnerable in order to maintain connections with others. She gestured to the images still playing around them, visions of humans and aliens working together in ways that enhanced both species rather than diminishing either. In exchange, I offer the resources and knowledge of the Crimson Dominion, not as subjects to be ruled, but as partners in something entirely new. Dr. Kim's scientific mind was already working through the implications. You're talking about fundamental changes to how galactic civilization operates. I'm talking about evolution, Serafina agreed. Not the transformation of individuals into something more than mortal, but the transformation of civilization itself into something more than it has been. Marcus looked around at his crewmates, seeing the same mix of excitement and uncertainty on their faces that he felt in his own heart. What Serafina was proposing was far more ambitious and dangerous than simply accepting personal transformation. She was asking them to help reshape the fundamental structure of galactic society. What about your empire? Marcus asked. What happens to the beings who have already been transformed? Serafina's expression became sad, but determined. They will always be what they have become. Perfect, powerful, and empty. But perhaps, if we succeed in what I am proposing, we can ensure that no others share their fate. She moved to stand directly in front of Marcus again, and he felt that familiar sensation of being seen completely and utterly. You asked earlier what you would become if you accepted my original offer. Now I ask you, what will you become if you accept this one? Marcus thought about the question, considering not just his own answer, but what it meant for humanity as a whole. They were being offered the chance to become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that could bridge the gap between power and wisdom, between advancement and humanity. We'll become what we've always been, he said finally. Human. Just human, but human on a scale we've never imagined before. Serafina's eyes blazed with something that might have been hope. And do you believe that will be enough? Marcus looked around at his crewmates, seeing in their faces the same qualities that had driven humanity to reach for the stars in the first place. Curiosity, courage, the stubborn refusal to accept that problems couldn't be solved or that better outcomes weren't possible. I think it might be exactly what the galaxy needs, he replied. The amphitheater erupted in light as Serafina threw back her head and laughed with genuine joy. Around them, the bone ship began to transform, its organic structures shifting and changing as alien technology responded to their new purpose. Marcus could feel the attention of thousands of transformed beings focused on this moment. And for the first time, he thought he detected something like interest in their perfect, empty faces. Then, let us begin, Serafina said, her voice carrying across the transforming ship like a song of rebirth. Let us discover what becomes possible when power chooses to serve wisdom instead of demanding that wisdom serve power. As the changes accelerated around them, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation unlike anything he had ever experienced. They weren't just about to change their own lives. They were about to attempt something that would determine the future of countless civilizations across half the galaxy. The most remarkable thing wasn't that they had been offered this opportunity. The most remarkable thing was that they were human enough to try to be worthy of it. 6 months had passed since the Prosperity had been absorbed into Serafina's ship, becoming the first human vessel to join what was now being called the New Dominion. The bone ship itself had undergone radical transformation, its organic architecture adapting to accommodate not just the human crew, but the revolutionary changes they had brought to its ancient systems. Marcus stood on what had once been an observation deck carved from the ribs of some cosmic leviathan, now transformed into a conference chamber where beings from dozens of species gathered to participate in something unprecedented in galactic history. A council where power was shared rather than concentrated. Through the vast viewport, he could see the first fruits of their new alliance. Where once Serafina's fleets had moved through space as instruments of conquest and control, they now served as escort and support for vessels from across the galaxy. Ships representing species that had been enemies for centuries worked together on projects that benefited all participants. Trade routes that had been monopolized by the strongest now carried goods and ideas freely between worlds that had never before had peaceful contact. The Velcari Crystalline Communion has agreed to share their collective memory technology, Dr. Kim announced, looking up from her data pad, where she was reviewing the latest reports from across the new Dominion. In exchange, the Threnodai song speakers will teach them harmonic communication methods that could allow their entire species to achieve perfect synchronization. Captain Rodriguez, now serving as coordinator for human integration efforts, nodded approvingly. That's the 15th major cooperative agreement this month. The economic projections are showing productivity increases across all participating systems. Marcus smiled, but his attention was focused on a figure standing apart from a main group. Serafina had positioned herself near one of the chamber's organic support pillars, her crimson eyes fixed on something only she could see. Over the past months, Marcus had learned to read her moods, and what he saw in her posture now was a mixture of wonder and uncertainty that suggested she was still adapting to the changes they had wrought together. "What do you see out there?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "The impossible," she replied softly. "For Millennium, I maintained order through the application of superior force. I prevented wars by making the cost of conflict too high to bear. I ensured peace by making everyone equally afraid of the consequences of disruption." She gestured toward the viewport, where a massive construction project was taking place. Ships from a dozen different species were working together to build something that resembled a cross between a space station and a living organism, a new kind of facility designed to serve as a neutral meeting point where species could interact without the historical baggage of conquest and submission. "What I see now," Serafina continued, "is cooperation that exists not because of fear, but because the participants have discovered that they can accomplish together what none of them could achieve alone." Marcus watched a team of human engineers working alongside beings that looked like walking crystals and others that resembled sentient energy fields. The sight still amazed him, even after 6 months of increasingly routine miracles. Each species brought unique capabilities to the project, and instead of one dominating the others, they had found ways to integrate their differences into something greater than the sum of its parts. "Are you saying you regret the way you ruled before?" he asked. Serafina was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus wondered if he had overstepped some boundary. Then she turned to look at him directly, her ancient eyes holding depths of emotion he was still learning to recognize. "I regret that I never understood there was another way," she said. "For centuries, I believed that intelligent beings were fundamentally competitive, that cooperation was possible only when enforced by superior power. Your species has shown me that I was wrong, not about the nature of most intelligent life, but about the possibilities that exist when even one species chooses differently." Dr. Harrison approached them, his medical scanner beeping softly as he completed his routine monitoring of the chamber's atmosphere. The device was one of dozens of innovations that had emerged from cross-species collaboration, combining human medical knowledge with alien technology to create tools that could monitor the health of beings whose biology was completely alien to Earth life. "The atmospheric mix is optimal for all current participants," he reported. "The Colossus delegation should be arriving within the hour, and their environmental needs have been integrated into the chamber systems." The Colossus were one of the more challenging species to accommodate. Massive beings whose natural environment was the crushing gravity and methane atmosphere of gas giant planets. They had initially been impossible to include in face-to-face negotiations. But human ingenuity, combined with Serafina's advanced technology, had produced environmental suits that allowed them to participate directly in discussions that affected their entire civilization. "Any word from the Outer Rim territories?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "The reports from the hegemony border have been concerning." Marcus felt his mood darken at the mention of the hegemony. Not every power in the galaxy had embraced the changes sweeping through the new dominion. The hegemony, a confederation of militaristic species that controlled nearly a quarter of known space, viewed the cooperation between former enemies as a direct threat to their own expansion plans. "They've established a blockade around the Xerian system," Dr. Kim reported, her expression grim. "Any ship carrying supplies to the refugee colonies is being turned away by force." The Xerian situation was one of several tests facing the new Dominion's principles. The system housed millions of refugees from various conflicts, beings who had lost their homeworlds to war, environmental disaster, or economic collapse. Under Serafina's old regime, they would have been ignored or absorbed into the Dominion as expendable labor. Under the new system, they had become a priority for humanitarian aid. The hegemony is testing us, Serafina observed. They want to see if our cooperation can survive when faced with traditional power. Marcus studied the tactical displays showing the positions of various fleets around the Xerian system. The hegemony blockade was formidable, composed of warships from 3 different species working in perfect military coordination. It was exactly the kind of situation that the old Crimson Dominion would have resolved through overwhelming force. "What are our options?" he asked. Captain Rodriguez pulled up a holographic map showing the current positions of all new Dominion assets. "We have the firepower to break the blockade," he said. Serafina's fleets alone could scatter the hegemony forces without significant losses. But using that option would prove the hegemony's point, Dr. Kim added. It would demonstrate that cooperation only works until force becomes necessary, and then we fall back on the same methods everyone else uses. Marcus felt the weight of the decision pressing down on the chamber. This was the moment they had all known would come eventually, when their idealistic vision of galactic cooperation would face its first serious challenge from those who preferred the old ways of dominance and submission. "There might be another option," he said slowly, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "What if we don't break the blockade? What if we go around it?" Serafina raised an eyebrow, a gesture she had learned from observing human expressions. "Explain." "The hegemony blockade is designed to prevent supplies from reaching the refugee colonies," Marcus continued, his excitement growing as the idea developed. "But it's positioned around the normal space lanes, the routes that cargo ships have always used. What if we don't use those routes?" Dr. Harrison caught on first. "You're talking about the dimensional fold technology the Valkyrie developed. The method they use to step partially outside normal space, combined with human navigation techniques and Threnodai song guidance." Marcus nodded. "We could deliver supplies directly to the planet's surface without ever entering the space the hegemony is monitoring." Captain Rodriguez was already running calculations on his tactical display. It would require unprecedented cooperation between at least 4 different species, using technologies that have never been integrated before. "And if it works," Dr. Kim added, her scientific enthusiasm overcoming her caution, "it would demonstrate that cooperation can accomplish things that force simply cannot." Serafina studied the proposal for several long moments, her expression cycling through emotions Marcus was still learning to interpret. He could see her ancient strategic mind working through the implications, not just for the immediate situation, but for the long-term future of galactic civilization. "The risk is enormous," she finally said. "If the attempt fails, we lose more than just the relief supplies. We lose credibility with every species watching to see whether our new approach can handle serious challenges." "And if we succeed?" Marcus asked. "If we succeed," Serafina replied, her voice taking on a note of wonder, "we prove that intelligence and cooperation can triumph over simple application of force. We demonstrate that there are solutions to galactic problems that don't require anyone to be conquered or dominated." The chamber fell silent as the full implications of the proposal settled over the group. They weren't just discussing a relief mission. They were contemplating an action that could fundamentally change how conflicts were resolved throughout the galaxy. "I'll need to coordinate with the Valkyrie collective consciousness," Dr. Kim said, breaking the silence. "Their dimensional technology is still largely theoretical to us. And I'll work with the Threnodai song speakers to develop navigation harmonics that can guide ships through folded space," Captain Rodriguez added. Dr. Harrison was already making notes on a scanner. "Medical protocols for beings traveling through dimensional folds will need to be completely redesigned. The biological effects could be significant." Marcus felt a familiar surge of excitement as he watched his crewmates dive into the planning process. This was what humans did best. Faced with an impossible problem, they immediately began figuring out how to make it possible. "There's one more consideration," Seraphina said, her voice carrying a note of caution that brought everyone's attention back to her. "If we succeed in this mission, the hegemony will be forced to escalate their response. They cannot allow their blockade to be rendered irrelevant without losing face among their own member species." "You're saying this could lead to war," Marcus realized. "I'm saying this could lead to a new kind of conflict," Seraphina corrected. "Not the traditional wars of conquest and territory, but a struggle between two completely different philosophies of how intelligent beings should interact with each other." Marcus looked around at his crewmates, seeing the same mix of determination and apprehension on their faces that he felt in his own heart. They had known this moment would come, when their idealistic vision would face its first serious test against the harsh realities of galactic politics. "The question," he said finally, "is whether we believe our way is worth fighting for." "Not fighting for," Dr. Kim corrected gently. "Whether we believe it's worth proving." Seraphina smiled, an expression that had become more frequent and more genuinely warm over the past months. "Then let us prove it. Let us show the galaxy that there are better solutions than force, better outcomes than conquest, better futures than endless repetition of the same ancient conflicts." As the planning began in earnest, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation that went far beyond the immediate mission. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before, a demonstration that cooperation could achieve what domination could not. The most remarkable thing wasn't that they were willing to try. The most remarkable thing was that they had convinced one of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful beings that it was worth trying with them. The dimensional fold operation began at precisely 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time, with representatives from 7 different species working in perfect synchronization aboard a hybrid vessel that had never existed before in the galaxy's history. Marcus stood in the command center, a chamber that seamlessly blended human engineering with Velcari crystal matrices, Threnodai harmonic resonators, and Seraphina's ancient biotechnology. "Dimensional framework is stable," reported Kethvar, the Velcari collective representative whose crystalline form pulsed with data streams visible to the naked eye. "The fold space is accepting our navigational parameters. Harmonic guidance systems are locked onto the Xerian planetary resonance," added Silamoth, the Threnodai whose song speech created visible patterns in the air around her. "We can follow the music of their world directly to the surface." Marcus monitored his own station, which displayed a real-time integration of all the various technologies working together. The sight still amazed him. Human intuitive navigation interfacing with alien sciences to create something that transcended what any single species could have achieved. Through the hybrid viewports, he could see space itself bending around their vessel, reality folding like origami to create shortcuts through dimensions that didn't quite exist in normal physics. "Cargo status?" Captain Rodriguez asked from his position at the coordination center. "All relief supplies are secured and ready for deployment," Dr. Harrison reported. "Medical supplies, food concentrates, environmental stabilizers, and construction materials for temporary housing. Everything the refugee colonies requested. But the real cargo they carried was hope, the demonstration that the new Dominion's principles could work even under pressure from those who opposed them." "Hegemony fleet positions?" Dr. Kim asked, monitoring the sensor arrays that somehow functioned even while the ship existed partially outside normal space. "Still maintaining their blockade around the conventional approach vectors," Seraphina answered from her position near the organic control interfaces. "They have not detected our approach. Their sensors are designed to monitor normal space, not dimensional folds." Marcus felt a thrill of anticipation as their destination began to materialize through the folded space. Xerion was a small world, mostly desert with scattered oases where the refugee camps had been established. From their current position, Existing partially outside conventional reality, they could see the planet's surface directly without interference from the hegemony blockade. Initiating final approach sequence, Kethvar announced, their crystalline form brightening as they interfaced more deeply with the dimensional fold technology. Preparing to translate back into normal space directly above the primary refugee settlement. The ship shuddered as it began to transition between dimensional states, and Marcus felt a peculiar sensation in his inner ear as his human biology struggled to adapt to the shifting physics around them. Around him, representatives from the other species showed their own signs of dimensional stress, but none of them faltered in their duties. Translation complete, Silamoth sang, her harmonic communication creating a triumphant chord that resonated through the ship's structure. We have successfully bypassed the hegemony blockade. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the refugee settlement spread out below them. Thousands of temporary structures housing beings from dozens of different species, all united by the common experience of having lost their original homes to various forms of conflict or disaster. The sight of their ship appearing without warning created a visible stir throughout the camps as word spread that help had arrived. Beginning supply deployment, Dr. Harrison announced, initiating the carefully planned distribution sequence. Packages of supplies materialized directly at key points throughout the settlement, guided by the same dimensional manipulation technology that had brought them here. But even as the mission succeeded, Marcus could see the larger implications beginning to unfold. On the tactical displays, the hegemony fleet was beginning to react to their sudden appearance. Ships that had been maintaining patrol formations around the outer system were now accelerating towards Zirion, their intent clear. Hegemony response, fleet approaching, Captain Rodriguez reported. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. Serafina moved closer to Marcus, her ancient eyes reflecting both satisfaction and concern. The first phase has succeeded, she said quietly. We have proven that cooperation can achieve what force cannot prevent. But now comes a more difficult challenge. They're going to demand we submit to their authority, Marcus realized. If we don't, this becomes the first open conflict between the new Dominion and the old ways of doing things. Not the first conflict, Serafina corrected. The first opportunity to demonstrate that conflict itself can be transcended. The communication array activated, filled with an incoming transmission from the approaching hegemony fleet. The voice that emerged belonged to Admiral Crexton of the Hegemony War fleet, a being whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the galaxy. Unidentified vessel, you have violated the lawful blockade of this system. Surrender immediately or face the consequences of your actions. Captain Rodriguez moved to respond, but Serafina gestured for him to wait. Let me, she said, activating the transmission array with her biotech interface. Admiral Crexton, she said, her voice carrying across the void with the authority of a millennium of rule. This is Serafina Nixthara. I believe you know who I am. The pause that followed was significant. Throughout the galaxy, Serafina's reputation as the Crimson Queen was still intact, and even the hegemony treated her with cautious respect. Crimson Queen, Crexton's response came finally. Your presence here is unexpected. Surely you understand the necessity of maintaining proper blockade protocols. What I understand, Serafina replied, is that you are about to witness the future of galactic civilization. The question is whether you will adapt to that future or be left behind by it. On the tactical displays, Marcus could see the hegemony fleet spreading into attack formation, but their movements were hesitant. They clearly hadn't expected to confront Serafina herself, and their commanders were reassessing the situation. The refugees below have received the supplies they need to survive, Serafina continued. No hegemony interests have been harmed, no territories violated, no sovereignty challenged. What has been demonstrated is that cooperation between species can accomplish what traditional power structures cannot prevent. You speak of cooperation, Crexton replied, but I see violation of established authority. The hegemony will not tolerate the precedent you are attempting to set. Marcus felt the tension in the command center rise as both fleets maneuvered into position. Around him, representatives from multiple species worked at their stations, maintaining readiness for whatever came next. The irony wasn't lost on him. If this resulted in combat, it would be beings from 7 different species fighting together against an enemy that claimed to represent order and stability. Admiral, Marcus said, surprising himself by activating the communication array. This is Marcus Chun, representing humanity in the New Dominion Alliance. A human. Crexton's voice carried a note of dismissive amusement. Your species has barely left your home system, yet you presume to address Hegemony Command. I presume to offer you a choice, Marcus replied. You can engage us in combat, which will prove only that you are capable of destroying those who disagree with you. Or you can observe what we have accomplished here and consider whether there might be better ways to achieve your own goals. Our goals do not require the approval of refugees and idealists, Crexton responded. But they might benefit from their cooperation, Dr. Kim interjected, joining the conversation. The relief supplies we delivered today were produced using collaborative technologies that no single species possesses. The productivity increases we're seeing throughout the New Dominion are available to any civilization willing to share knowledge instead of hoarding it. Marcus watched the tactical displays as the Hegemony fleet continued its approach, but he noticed something interesting in their formation patterns. They were preparing for battle, but they were also maintaining communication formations, arrangements that would allow for rapid consultation between their various command vessels. They're not sure what to do, Captain Rodriguez observed quietly. This isn't the kind of situation their protocols were designed to handle. Serafina smiled, an expression that had become warmer and more genuinely human over the past months. That uncertainty is exactly what we needed to create. For the first time, they're being forced to question whether force is truly the best solution to their problems. The communication array activated again, but this time the transmission came from the refugee settlement below. A voice Marcus didn't recognize, speaking an accented but clear universal standard, filled the command center. This is Delegate Yarjin speaking for the Zirian Refugee Council. We wish to address both fleets. On the view screen, an image appeared showing a being that seemed to be composed of living metal, their form reflecting the light from Zirian's twin suns. Behind them, Marcus could see representatives from dozens of different species, all gathered in what appeared to be a hastily arranged but formally structured assembly. For months, we have been caught between conflicting powers, unable to receive the aid we needed to rebuild our lives, Yarjan continued. Today, we have witnessed something unprecedented, aid delivered not through conquest or submission, but through cooperation between former enemies. The delegate paused, and Marcus could see other figures moving in the background, beings from across the galaxy who had found themselves displaced by various conflicts and now formed an unexpected community in exile. We hereby formally request membership in the New Dominion Alliance, not as subjects or subordinates, but as equal partners in the pursuit of solutions that benefit all participants. The statement hung in space like a challenge to both fleets. Marcus realized that the refugees weren't just requesting protection. They were choosing sides in a fundamental conflict over how galactic civilization should operate. You cannot accept membership from refugees. Crexton's voice carried a note of desperation. They have no sovereign territory, no established government, no authority to make such declarations. They have something more important, Marcus replied. They have the right to choose their own future. The Hegemony fleet had reached optimal firing range, but Marcus noticed they had not targeted their weapons. The massive warships hung in space like predators, uncertain whether their prey was worth the effort of hunting. Admiral Crexton, Serafina said, her voice taking on the commanding tone she had once used to rule half the galaxy. I offer you one final choice. You can attack us and prove that the hegemony's only solution to problems is violence. Or you can withdraw and demonstrate that you are capable of recognizing when circumstances require new approaches. And if we withdraw? Crexton asked, what happens to hegemony authority throughout this sector? Your authority is based on your ability to provide stability and security for your member species, Dr. Kim replied. If our methods can provide better stability and security through cooperation instead of domination, then your authority adapts or becomes irrelevant. Marcus held his breath as the communication went silent. Around him, the hybrid crew maintained their stations with professional calm, but he could sense the tension that connected them all. This moment would determine whether the new Dominion's principles could survive contact with traditional galactic power structures. When Crexton's voice returned, it carried a note of resignation mixed with curiosity. Crimson Queen, your reputation suggests that any conflict between our forces would be costly for all participants. More costly than you can imagine, Seraphina agreed. But not because of the battle itself, because it would prove that even beings capable of transcending the old ways of thinking will ultimately fall back on them when challenged. We are withdrawing from this system, Crexton announced finally. But this matter is not concluded. The Hegemony Council will consider what we have observed here. As the Hegemony fleet began to turn away from Zirion, Marcus felt a surge of emotions he couldn't entirely identify. Relief, certainly, but also something more profound, the realization that they had just participated in a fundamental shift in how intelligent beings could relate to each other. Phase 2 complete, Captain Rodriguez announced. No shots fired, no casualties sustained, and the precedent established that cooperation can achieve what force cannot prevent. Seraphina moved to stand beside Marcus, her ancient presence somehow less alien now than it had been when they first met. Your species has given me something I thought was lost forever, she said quietly. What's that? Marcus asked. Hope, she replied, using the word he had first heard her speak months ago. Hope that the galaxy can become something better than it has been. Hope that intelligence can triumph over simple application of power. Hope that even beings as old and set in their ways as I am can still learn to change. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the lights of the refugee settlement below, brighter now with the arrival of supplies and the promise of support from a new Dominion. Above them, space was clear of hostile ships for the first time in months, and communications arrays throughout the system crackled with messages of gratitude and requests for information about joining their alliance. What happens next? Dr. Harrison asked. Next, Marcus said, feeling the weight and promise of the future settling around them like a comfortable blanket. We proved that this wasn't just a lucky exception. We proved that cooperation and hope can work on a galactic scale. Seraphina smiled, and in her expression, Marcus saw something he had never expected to find in the face of an ancient alien vampire queen. Pride in what humanity had accomplished, and excitement about what they might accomplish together. Then, let us begin, she said. Let us show the galaxy what becomes possible when power chooses to serve wisdom instead of demanding that wisdom serve power. As their ship prepared to fold space once more, carrying word of their success to the farthest reaches of the new Dominion, Marcus realized that the most extraordinary thing about their story wasn't that they had encountered an ancient alien power. The most extraordinary thing was that they had remained human throughout the encounter, and in doing so, had helped that ancient power remember what it meant to grow, to hope, and to choose cooperation over conquest. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in his life, Marcus was certain that was exactly as it should be.